They say revenge is a dish best served cold. But what if it comes fiery and hot with a topping of violence and a garnish of utter hatred? Why don't we find out? Because these are some of the most insane revenge stories in history. We start off with an Asian queen of the seas, and fun fact, an inspiration for one of the pirate lords in Pirates of the Caribbean. Qing Shi was married to Zhang Yi, a notorious pirate captain who was in charge of the Red Flag Fleet, before disagreements with the Qing dynasty led to his execution. Now, this really pissed Qing Shi off, so she used her influence and reputation to take over the Red Flag Fleet, eyeing vengeance and revenge on the Qing dynasty. Talk about a proper villain arc being born. She ended up sinking countless Chinese ships, even British ones who were unfortunate enough to be in the area. She grew her fleet in the process, but a boiling point had been reached for the Chinese government and foreign powers, so the Qing dynasty launched a major military offensive against her fleet. Facing certain defeat, she called for a parley, if you would, and negotiated her way to a full pardon, living the rest of her life as a pretty respected businesswoman. A savvy pirate and a list of adventures even Jack Sparrow would be proud of. And truly, one of history's most notorious and vengeful women. Lorena Bobbit and her husband are a great example of what happens when you f*** around and find out. But the graphic nature of it is the reason it finds itself on this list. After years of alleged physical and sexual abuse, Bobbit reached her boiling point in 1993, slicing off her husband's banana while he was asleep. Oh, and she didn't just leave it there. She took it with her and discarded it in an open field. Maybe some more bananas could grow. Anyways, because of the nature and motives behind the crime, it gained a lot of media attention. And it's not hard to see why. She was eventually charged with malicious intent on causing serious harm, but her strong legal team were able to get her out of most of the heat. It's never nice to see another man's lightsaber being taken away from him, but in this case, some might say it was well deserved. And it helped direct attention to the issue victims of domestic abuse face, which is always a good thing. So I guess we're Team Bobbit for this one. It's 1823 in a snowy South Dakota, and Hugh Glass finds himself in a wrestling match with a grizzly bear while scouting away from his team. He manages to win, but sustains life-threatening injuries, namely broken ribs, a torn scalp, and a broken leg. Ouch! Now, his team doesn't think he survives this, so two men, Fitzgerald and Bridger, step up to give Glass a proper burial once he passes. But here's the twist. They end up robbing and leaving Glass, thinking he would slowly pass. But I guess they didn't know who they were dealing with. Fueled by pure revenge, grit, and determination, Glass managed to practically crawl his way 200 miles through treacherous cold weather to the nearest settlement. And yeah, that Leonardo DiCaprio movie about this story where he uses animal carcasses for warmth is all real. Brutal, but necessary because he eventually healed from his wounds, setting out for revenge against those who left him for dead. However, when Glass eventually finds Bridger and Fitzgerald, he lets them off scot-free, deciding to be the bigger man, which is incredibly honorable if you ask me. Don't think a lot of us could handle it as coolly. So, moral of the story? Be nice, or don't rob a guy who just got mauled by a bear. Who knows? Phulon Devi's story is nothing short of a dark, underworldly Scorsese film and is wrapped around controversy in the heart of India. Let's dive into it. So Devi grew up surrounded by poverty and heaps of discrimination due to their lower social status. Like many Indian women, she was married off at a young age, And unfortunately, this didn't do much to protect her from more abuse, not only at the hands of her husband, but other higher class men. Devi reached her last straw, and in 1981 joined a gang of bandits, eventually earning her the nickname the Bandit Queen. Yeah, pretty cool. She convinced the gang to join her revenge story, targeting those who had wronged her and oppressed her people. It's worth noting that her actions aren't entirely heroic or villainous. She and her gang committed horrifying acts in her vengeful quest. But she was also seen as a symbol of defiance and bravery, as someone who took matters into her own hands for the betterment of her life and her people's. She even became a member of the Indian Parliament after her jail sentence and release. So yeah, as courageous as they get, but savage nonetheless. Though you can't really blame her after all she's been through. This entry isn't a person, but a people. A people who were against all odds but managed to emerge on top. An underdog story that, till today, inspires oppressed groups to rise above the discrimination they face. This, folks, is the Haitian Revolution. In the 1700s, Haiti was actually a French colony and very much contributed to the colony's successful economic ventures. Unfortunately, this meant a lot of workers, and by workers we mean slaves. Yeah, you can guess the conditions were brutal and the labor was as harsh as it gets. Over 100 years of injustice bottled up had finally reached its limit. And so the Haitians sought revenge, mounting a revolt against a much larger enemy. But as they say, quality over quantity. And the years of opposition fueled a fire that the French just couldn't match. Against all odds, with sheer determination for freedom, the Haitian revolutionaries succeeded and established an independent nation. And guess what? It was the first ever successful slave revolt in history. A true David and Goliath encounter, just with like hundreds of them. So this one is a little different to the rest. Jack Unterweger was actually a convicted serial killer. So yeah, not a good guy. But his revenge story, or stories, are pretty diabolical. So let's slice right into this. In the 70s, Jack was sentenced to life in prison for murder after a German teenager, Blanka Bankova, gave a fatal testimony leading to the conviction. Now, during his time behind bars, he became quite the respected individual for his intellect and writing talents, garnering respect and eventually being granted parole. Quite the turnaround for a murderer, or so we thought. Jack was able to convince society of his reformedness, and soon after his release, he started plotting his revenge. He first tracked and hunted down Brakova for her role as a witness in his initial sentencing. The poor girl really just found herself in the wrong place at the wrong time. He then targeted a number of prostitutes. Why, you ask? Well, it's worth noting here he had a troubled childhood relationship with his mother, who worked in prostitution to make ends meet, adding a chilly twist to a motive to his acts, and a hint of revenge, it seems. That's it from us. This has been Conquering History. See you soon.